From the beautiful Finger Lakes region of upstate New York, this is the Dental Lighthouse Podcast. We take questions from anyone in the dental profession and discuss what it takes to win not only in dentistry, but in life. Business, leadership, relationships, parenting, health and wellness, money management, nothing is off limits on the Dental Lighthouse Podcast. I'm Jason Tanoory, your host, and have over 20 years of experience to pull from. Learn from my mistakes and let me help you collapse time so you can become the best version of yourself. Yo, before we roll into this conversation, I just want to give you some context. It's a crossover episode with one of my best friends, Dr. Mark Costas, who really doesn't need any introduction, has arguably the most popular dental podcast in the world. I say arguably, but I'm sure there's some data to support that is the number one podcast in the world, the Dentalpreneur podcast. Just such great content. He drops information every day. If you listen to his podcast at any level, I'm sure you've heard some of my presentations and content on his podcast. Mark runs one of the most successful coaching groups in the country, of which I'm blessed to be a black belt coach in his organization. So this conversation really just touched on a lot of different things, from developing levels of leadership and accountability within your organization to a get-together that Mark and I had celebrating my 25th wedding anniversary and everything in between. So I hope you enjoy this conversation. I really did. Talking to Mark is just so easy. He's just so good at what he does. And I know that you'll find some value in this conversation. And I hope that you, if you're not already, if you're that one or two people in this world that's not already a subscriber to the Dentalpreneur podcast, I hope you check it out. With lots of love, hope to talk soon. Reach out if you need anything. Later.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Dentalpreneur Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Mark Costas. What's up, my friends? I hope you're doing great out there today in podcast land. Hey, this is a part 2 of a 2-parter featuring my great friend, Dr. Jason Tanoory, who is a multiple practice owner, extremely successful entrepreneur, and DSI black belt coach. He's been getting on a lot of stages lately. He's been creating a lot of content lately, and everything that he talks about and everything that he teaches is gold. If you guys haven't listened to part 1 of this 2-parter, make sure you pause this recording right now. Go on back and listen to part 1. It'll make a whole lot more sense. All right. In this part 2 episode, Jason and I discuss the importance of understanding how team members want to be appreciated, using the example of love languages to better connect with staff. We talked about the concept of consequences within a practice when expectations are not met. Jason emphasized the significance of leadership principles, including peer-to-peer accountability and running effective meetings to build a winning team. He talked about emotional control and leadership, introducing the idea of sitting in the gap before responding to challenging situations. And he and I talked about maintaining personal relationships as busy professionals, reflecting on the importance of making time for friends and personal connections despite busy schedules. All right, guys, I hope you get a ton of value from this part 2 episode. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon. So it is just kind of starting with an overall mindset and implementing when you see an opportunity, right? So you are recognizing people according to their language of appreciation. You're communicating with them according to their language of appreciation. You're not hesitating when you see the opportunity to praise, recognize, or even correct. So I want to ask, what does that sound like if it's not just love? If it is, hey, your performance is slipping, I've noticed, and I think you could do better, or you really messed up on this. How do you deliver that and not, contradict these philosophies?
Yeah, super good question, right? So we have a rubric, and this falls under the principle of honesty, right? And let's use a simple example of, your greeting coordinator is responsible for cleaning the reception bathroom, right? And they're not doing it. So someone has to have an uncomfortable conversation with them. So in our world, in our ecosystem, assuming that you've built up some equity by showing them patience and kindness and humility and respect and forgiveness and selflessness and all these other principles, once you have to have this honest conversation, they're more receptive to it. And it's been our experience that 95% of people out there are much more receptive to having this conversation when all those other things have been laid out. The one personality that doesn't get receptive to that is typically someone with a narcissistic behavior. But, hopefully you don't have anyone like that on your team. Mm-hmm. So if you realize that there's a specific task that they're not doing or underperforming, we always, from a position of empathy and curiosity, have a conversation with this person and ask the same questions. First question is, hey, Mary, I noticed that the reception room bathroom wasn't clean. Just want to ask you some questions. Were you aware that that is your responsibility? And a lot of times the answer to that question was no. And if that's the answer to that question, then it's a great learning opportunity because perhaps your checklists are not ideal. Perhaps your onboarding wasn't dialed in. So you always have to ask that question first. Were you aware that this is one of your responsibilities? Mm-hmm. Yes or no? If they answer no, then what an opportunity to get recalibrated on this person's job duties. The next question if they say yes, the next question we always ask is, do you feel like you're well trained to do this particular task? And to use this fictitious example of the bathroom, do you know what a clean bathroom looks like? Do you know where the mop is? Do you know where the glass cleaner is? Do you know where the toilet paper is? All of these things that we know because we've done it for 20 years, but a new 22-year-old that's, smiling at people as they walk in may have no clarity on what it means to have a clean bathroom. So first question is, were you responsible that this is your responsibility? Or were you aware that this is your responsibility? Second question is, do you feel like you're well trained on this responsibility? And then the question that really moves the needle is, are you aware of the consequences of you not performing this task at a high level? And by consequences, we don't mean you're going to get suspended or you're going to get fired. We mean, what are the consequences from the patient's perspective, from the business's perspective, from other team members' perspective when the bathroom's not cleaned properly? And a great example, and you have to make up your own consequences based on your own ecosystem. But for this particular example, Mary, what do you think a new patient thinks when they come to the front desk? It's their first appointment. They check in. They're all excited. They have to go to the bathroom and they see it's a mess. Like, what do you think their perception is on the rest of the office? Do you think that they feel that the sterilization area is well kept? Do you feel like they think we keep the treatment rooms as clean as possible? I can assure you that if I walked into a doctor's office and the bathroom was a mess, then I'm going to start to ask questions in my own head. What else in this office is not kept up? So with that framework, you can traditionally be able to get through a lot of responsibilities of someone that are either not doing it or not doing it at a high level. Again, that's a super simple example, but you can really get into the weeds on all of these things. Like, for example, if someone's not routinely checking in lab cases, if someone is routinely gossiping, like, no matter what the issue or inefficiency is, if you come at it from a perspective of love and ask this rubric of questions, we always find that we can get through it.
I love it, dude. I love it. So as you are integrating this mindset and these practices into your practice, do you have like a kickoff meeting? Is it that official? Or do you just start slowly integrating these opportunities into your day? How would you recommend that if somebody's really, really excited about what you're talking about right now, they begin?
Well, if they understand the principles, then it's just a matter of kind of going back to having the courage to act, is the number one thing. If they need to take a deep dive on the principles, or if they need to have more clarity on the principles, they can reach out to me. I can help them with that. Like you alluded to, we just finished a great 8-week course. It's about 8 hours of content where we unpack every single servant leadership principle, but we also unpack a lot of other things. Like at the beginning of the course, we talk about making sure the doctor has clarity in their vision and their purpose. We talk about quarterly meetings, how to run them. We talk about weekly meetings, how to run them. We talk about, as you know, my take on Patrick Lencioni's 5 dysfunctions of a team, and how to really define winning within your team and how to help people get to winning. We talk about peer-to-peer accountability and how it's just an amazing tool to use so people aren't coming to you with everything. But the second half of the course is where we really dive into the specific leadership principles, how to show patience to someone. And servant leadership is a muscle, right? So just like playing the piano, just like shooting hoops, it's a habit that needs to be developed. You can't just say, okay, boom, I've read the book, I'm a servant leader, like, let me add it. You have to slowly but surely work on this day in and day out. And just like if you've never played the piano, the first time you play it, it's going to sound god awful. The second time will sound a little bit better. And then, as you do it for a while, you'll start to gain some momentum. The first uncomfortable conversation you have with someone is going to feel tremendously awkward. But when you start to see the benefits of it, the second conversation is that much easier. And then the next conversation is that much easier. Just like with showing acts of patience and kindness, like for me, it was really difficult. I struggled to do that. So I had to set reminders on my calendar. I had to say, I'm going to try to find Megan doing something amazing and be right there to recognize her. So it just comes, as far as implementation, it just comes down to where you're at. If you know the principles inside and out and you're still not doing them, then you just have to develop the courage to do them. And we can spend time talking about stimulus gap response and how to develop courage and stuff like that. And we take a deep dive about all that stuff in the course. But if you don't know the material and you just want to get exposed to it at a really deep, intimate level, then I can help you with that.
I'm going to push on just one of those things you just said, stimulus gap experience. And this is something that I think meditation helps. I think journaling helps. I think just slowing everything down, maybe controlling your caffeine intake helps as well. But if you're a fiery person, and it's funny, my family's split right down the middle. My sister and my dad have exactly the same personality. They're very, very slow, methodical, kind, soft-spoken, intentional with their speech and language. Just the type of people that are just a pleasure to be around, right? And then my mom and I are exactly the same in that we're super fiery and we're emotional and we're reactive. And that that does not serve you well in personal relationships, in a business context, as the boss and owner of a company. Those are the people that end up, if you don't control that and you don't have enough kind of self-awareness to recognize that you have the propensity for that, you end up with a lot of turnover and a lot of unhappy employees and a stressful life. So stimulus gap, control for me has been something that I've worked on my entire life, right? And that means literally, if something happens, you pause before you react to it, especially if it means communicating with somebody else. And, everybody knows that you can be completely controlled with a toddler, and any parent knows that you can be completely controlled with a toddler for 99 times out of 100, but that 100th time just might be the straw that broke the camel's back, and then you explode, and then you regret, all the things that come out of your mouth for your 5-minute tirade. So with this particular situation, when you're trying to control that stimulus response, that gap, and your reaction to what's happening in the moment, do you have any kind of tactics or strategies to control that?
Yeah, 100%. So there's a lot of tools, and you mentioned a couple of them, meditation and journaling. I always go back to, I think it's a default excuse to say to yourself, well, this is just how I'm wired, right? And the story that I tell when I lecture is I always reference this guy, Joey, who played softball, right? So he was in an adult softball league, super talented player. The problem with Joey is he would get kicked out of every second or third game. He would be arguing balls and strikes. He'd be arguing place at first. And we could have been a much better team if he didn't get thrown out as much as he did. And when you would try to approach him, on, dude, you got to get it under control, nothing would ever come to fruition because that was quote unquote how he was wired, right? Mm-hmm. And then the next season comes around and there's a new umpire in the league, and it turns out that Joey knows this umpire, and I could tell because he went up to the umpire and they had some pleasantries before the first game. So I said to Joey, I was like, how do you know that guy? And he's like, well, he's the pastor at my church. And I was like, oh, interesting. Guess how many games Joey got thrown out of that year? 0. Right. So you have the ability to control your emotions. You have the ability to, we like to use the term sit in the gap, right? Now you may have to sit in the gap for 20 minutes before you respond. And that's okay if that's part of your leadership journey. I don't want to throw my wife under the bus, but there was a lot of situations like right at the dinner table where when the kids were younger, they'd be playing around and one of them would knock over a glass of milk, right? Unintentionally, but they shouldn't have been fooling around, and milk runs all over the table. Kara would lose her mind. She would start yelling, right? And then the question is like, who is this serving? Like, to your point that you just alluded to, like, this isn't really helping anyone. Like, we have to figure out a better system. So nowadays, when something like that happens, she'll leave the room. She'll do some box breathing. So she's sitting in the gap until she can collect herself, until she can come back into the room and be proud of the response that she's going to exhibit. And that's tons of growth being exhibited by Kara. If you want to become the best leader that you can, you have to learn to sit in the gap, and you have to learn to sit in the gap for as long as you need. Now, saying this in the most humble way possible, I feel like I've practiced this religiously for a long, long time, where I don't need to sit in the gap that long anymore to respond in a way that I'm proud of. But I think young leaders don't realize that even little things like rolling your eyes or sighing, like these things are huge slaps in the face to the person that you're talking to, and they go directly against our first principle of servant leadership, which is showing patience. So when you roll your eyes, you're not exhibiting patience to someone. When you sigh, you're not exhibiting patience to someone. So you have to be mindful of that. You have to realize that that's a blind spot for you, and you have to intentionally practice that. And for me to suggest that, once you take my course or once you spend an hour with me and going over the principles, you're going to be all set here, punch your ticket. That's not the case. What you need to do is then, okay, you've been given the material, you know the material, now you have to practice. And what I would encourage you to do is, okay, Monday morning from 8 to 9 a.m., you are going to be the best servant leader that you can possibly be. You are going to try everything you can to sit in the gap and respond the way that you should respond. It will be exhausting. Just like when you're playing piano for the first time or learning to play guitar, your hands are exhausted. But once you do it over and over and over again, it becomes second nature, and you can do it throughout the week as opposed to just Monday morning from 8 to 9.
That is awesome. That's brilliant. Jason, how can people get involved with your trainings? Is it a concurrent course? Do you have a beginning, middle, and end where everybody starts at the same time, or can people start at any time?
We just finished a course, so we'll probably start another course here maybe towards the end of the year. But we have recorded and edited a version of the course, and we've broken it up into modules. Each module is like 30 minutes. Like I said, it's 8 hours total. And we use, we eat our own cooking. So we use it for our own leaders. If we just hired 2 office managers, and the first part of their onboarding is going to be spending time with each one of these modules so they understand what leadership is for us. So if people want to have exposure to that, they can go to our website, dentallighthouse.com, and then just go to virtual training, and that's available to them. But I do feel that, and you and I were talking about this before we got on the call, before we started recording, is, in my opinion, the biggest gap in leadership in our industry is the doctor's inability or uninterest in truly trying to cultivate leadership within their organization. And like I shared with you before, when I'm on coaching calls, either one-on-one or in a group coaching format, I love to get a hold of these team leads and these office managers and build them up, because I can give them the tools to be the best servant leaders that they can be, to be the best leaders that that particular business needs, while the doctor's looking for MB2, right? Because it's harder for me to convince the doctor that he needs to be a great leader, because his default, as you know, is to always go to his happy place or his comfort place, let's say, which is doing clinical dentistry. But the office manager or the team lead, they really, in my opinion, in my experience, they really struggle to have the tools and the training to become the best servant leaders they can possibly be. And I feel like our course does a pretty good job of at least starting that journey for them.
That is awesome. So dentallighthouse.com is a great way to kind of get more information and to get access to the recordings and find out more information about when the next course starts.
Yeah, and we have a podcast where we talk a lot about this stuff. You know, I don't have a unique idea in my entire head. So I basically stole Dave Ramsey's podcast ideas, where he has small business owners call in and ask questions, and Dave Ramsey solves them. It's a great podcast for anyone to listen to, any small business owner. So we do the same thing. So I have dentists that'll call in and they'll say, I'm struggling with this, and we'll kind of unpack it. I've had a lot of office managers, regional managers, team leads call in, and we start to unpack things like that. So the podcast, Dental Lighthouse podcast, or the Dental Lighthouse website are a couple good resources if you're looking for those tools.
Awesome. Before I let you go, Jason, I want to kind of ask you a question that's somewhat related to this, but I would just love to get your take on it. You had an incredible anniversary get together in the Outer Banks, and I was lucky enough to be invited. We got to travel. Several friends got to travel from many, many different walks of life, right? These are people that were friends of yours through softball. These are friends of yours that you grew up with, friends of yours through dentistry, friends of yours that were neighbors, very, very close people to you, but you kind of put us all in this melting pot, in this large mansion on the Outer Banks, in this beautiful setting, and everybody got along. It was great. You were the common thread, though. You and Kara were the common thread to this eclectic group of people. What really touched me when I noticed is that you and Kara have very, very deep friendships and relationships from people of all walks of life. You know, not all professionals, not all sports people, not all church people, but you have a very close group of friends. Particularly for men, it's difficult to maintain relationships, and when you get to a certain age, it's hard to make new friendships, particularly for men, because it's easy for us to just kind of get in our hole and focus on work and focus on things that serve other people, like providing for our families, et cetera. And it's easy to make the excuse that I don't have time for myself, or I don't have time for friendships because XYZ. So I think that a big part of distress that men are experiencing nowadays is their lack of ability to make and maintain friendships. Do you have any tips for men out there that struggle with this?
Yeah, super good question. It's funny. I like, a lot of times I get questions about random things, and my answer kind of is always the same. It's just simple, just not easy, right? So I appreciate what you were saying about the Outer Banks trip. I thought it was an amazing trip, and Kara and I were not worried about the melting pot of people, because we knew we had really great friends in all facets of our life from all across the country. And good things happen when you get great people together and they just click, right? And after 15 to 20 minutes of awkwardness, all of a sudden everybody's best friends.
Yeah, I was best friends with everybody there. It was so great.
Yeah,
such a great
week. It was a lot of fun.
Oh my gosh.
It was a lot of fun. But I truly believe that we lie to ourselves that we don't have enough time. And a great example is literally for me coming off of that trip, I came to the realization, similar to you, that I feel like I have a lot of friends, but I am not as invested as I could or should or want to be. And And in a week or two, well, maybe 2 weeks before the Outer Banks trip, I got invited by all of my undergrad friends. We have about 10 of us, to go see Pearl Jam in Chicago. And I thought about it for a hot minute. And then I said, you know what? I just don't have the time. I have too many other things going on. So I said no. And then we had that Outer Banks trip, and literally driving home, I came to the realization of, what's really more important than trying to put effort in on maintaining these friendships. So literally on the way home, I text that group and I said, hey guys, if there's a ticket still available, I am totally in. And there was, and the trip was actually this past weekend. I flew into Chicago Friday morning, spent all day Friday with 10 of my best friends, went to Wrigley Field and the concert on Saturday, and then flew out Sunday morning. And it was an amazing 2 days. And I got to reconnect with so many amazing people, got to see Pearl Jam at Wrigley Field. And then when I got back into the house on Sunday, the house wasn't burnt down. The business wasn't bankrupt. My kids still recognized me. All of these fears that I'm like, oh my gosh, if I leave for 2 or 3 days, the world's going to fall apart. And that's just this lie that we tell to ourselves. So it's a very long-winded answer to your question of, I think if we are intentional about making the commitment, if we are intentional about putting it in our calendar and just protecting it like we would a date with our wife, then you can slowly but surely start to have these experiences and build on these experiences, and the rest will take care of itself. So that's where I'm at.
All right, man. I appreciate that. Well, Jason, it's been a pleasure as always to get to hang out with you. Can't wait to see you in a few weeks in Dallas. You are doing a co-presentation with one of my other favorite people in the world, Summer Casmel. I was just alerted to the fact that you guys are going to be double trouble up there. Man, that's going to be really cool. There's going to be some fireworks there. I can't wait to see that. So I appreciate that, and I can't wait to see you, brother. Thank you for all you do for our profession and for our community.
It's my pleasure. In fact, I was just on a Zoom call with Summer for an hour before getting on this call as we were working on our presentation. And she had mentioned that to me. She said, Mark's already telling the world that we're going to present together. So we have a high bar. And I was like, we'll figure it out. I think it'll be a great presentation. I think it'll be great material. And, when I'm presenting with someone like Summer, I can just take a step back and let her take the stage. So it's a win-win-win for me.
Well, she is nicer to look at than you, but I'm just saying.
Amen.
What's the title of the presentation, or what's the idea of the presentation?
We're going to basically soup to nuts on onboarding associates, but look at it from a perspective of that most people don't talk about, right? Like what, asking deeper questions and thinking outside of the box with benefit packages and different ways to look at partnership and phantom equity and stuff like that. So, there's people like, Ben Kakos that does a really good job on talking about stuff like that. Summer and I have, quite a bit of experience with associates, as do you. And I feel like there's more to be learned in all of the failures that we've had. So it's one of those situations where, what have we learned from all the failures that we've had, and how can we collapse time for the people of DSI by communicating that information to them?
Oh, dude, if this was about failures with associates, I should have been leading the charge of that group. If you need another one, I got more failures than both of you put together. I can guarantee that. I can't wait. We're
gonna have a Dr. X, right? It's gonna be you, right?
Dr. X. And then another thing this dude did. Can you believe this shit? Oh, God, it's so good, man.
I love it.
It's so good. Well, thanks, Jason. It's been a pleasure, man. What a great way to start my day. It can't get any better than this. I can't wait to see you, and make sure you guys check out dentallighthouse.com. Thanks, buddy. And if you'd like to take advantage of a special discount for Jason's courses, just go to dentallighthouse.com/Mark25. 25% discount, guys. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Jason Tanoory.
Thank you. That wraps up another episode of the Dental Lighthouse podcast. You have a choice today. Choose to be a lighthouse. Lighthouses are powerful and steadfast. They are beacons of light for others to reference when life gets turbulent. Go out into the world today and become a lighthouse for someone. Give more than you get. True joy comes from serving others. Start today. I'm Jason Tanoory, your host. Thank you for listening to the Dental Lighthouse podcast. For more information, podcast show notes, or links to anything that we have discussed today, please check out our website, thedentallighthouse.com. We would love to hear from you. If you would like to get on the show, please email us at podcast@thedentallighthouse.com.